Building a brand that lasts is not that much different from building a company that lasts. It's understanding the underlying promise, and it needs to be something bigger than the utility of the brand or the idea. There's lots of teddy bear companies, but for us to kind of hold and evoke this emotion, that's because we stand for something, and it's to add a little more heart to life. In human terms, it's how does the brand make you feel?
Some brands sell products, but your favorite ones and the most successful ones are selling something else entirely. Welcome to How Leaders Lead. I'm David Novak, and every week I have conversations with the very best leaders in the world to help you become the best leader that you can be. Today I'm talking with Sharon Price John, the CEO of Build-A-Bear. Now, Build-A-Bear made a name for itself as a mall-based retailer for kids, but as malls struggled, so did Build-A-Bear. Then Sharon took over. In her very first year as CEO, she brought Build-A-Bear back to profitability after a $49 million loss the year before. And the growth hasn't stopped since. With her at the helm, this brand has done something incredible. They've expanded into new digital channels, new demographics, and new experiences for all ages. At the heart of it all is Sharon's belief that meaning, not merchandise, is what makes a brand powerful. Because people don't fall in love with what you make. They fall in love with what it makes them feel. So if you want to build a brand that connects, and I mean really connects, this is the episode for you. Plus, we're going to talk about what's really happening in the adults-only bear cave. So here's my conversation with my good friend, and soon to be yours, Sharon Price John. You obviously love the toy business. You know, you've worked at Mattel, Hasbro, and you're now at Build-A-Bear. Looking back, what's your favorite toy of all time?
Oh, see, that's so loaded because I've worked on so many brands. But I loved stuffed animals. I collected stuffed animals as a little girl. So being here at Build-A-Bear makes a ton of sense. And one of my favorite toys was Barbie. And I think that was what drew me in the beginning. I wanted to do something fun after I'd gotten my MBA. And I know that's probably not a lot of people's objective is what's the funnest thing you can do. But that was sort of that was really part of my filter. And when I thought about Mattel as really a branded intellectual property company, that was focused on kids because I had been in the confections business as an advertising executive. I thought I could get my head wrapped around kids and kids stuff. But when I got the opportunity to work on the Barbie business, that really pushed me over the edge.
Fantastic. And now you're at Build-A-Bear, which is one of the very first experiential retail brands in the country. You know, explain what makes your retail experience so unique?
Well, first of all, I have to give so much credit to Maxine Clark, the founder of Build-A-Bear, who envisioned this and launched it back in 1997. And it was really based in the most sincere construct of just her individual love for her teddy bear as a child and the belief that if a child can make their own teddy bear, that brings it to life in a way that's even more special and meaningful. And so that was her, driver to do that. And when you come into a Build-A-Bear, if I wanted to break it down in a more sort of functional way, which isn't half as much fun, but more functional way, it's a very empowering, open-ended, but kind of guided creativity process. But you go through then the stuffing process with a bear builder, which is what we call them. And then they come to life in the mind of a child or even the mind of a child at heart when you put that heart ceremony together with them. It's very unique, extremely personal. And they place that inside the teddy bear or whichever animal they're creating. And they put attributes and wishes inside of that teddy bear and sew it up and then give it a hug test. The magic that goes on at that moment, the light that that just shines from their eyes on just this process. It's truly magical. And I don't think that even Maxine envisioned that it would be as memorable and special, that it ends up like marking moments in time. In fact, when we did some ethnographic studies after I got here, I wanted to find out like sort of where the value was, how stretchable the brand was, all those kinds of things. The specificity with which now adults and teens could speak about that first experience at Build-A-Bear was indelible. You could see how emotional it was. And you're like, wow, how much equity do we have packed in this brand that we don't even know that's monetizable? That was like the big quest for me then. But great question, because it is that experience that makes this extraordinary.
And now you're not just into bears that your customers can buy. You have all kinds of animals that you can build these days. And how have you really expanded the line over the years, and what drove you to do it?
Well, there were always other critters. So even though it's called Build-A-Bear, there's always have been, bunnies and puppy dogs and things like that. But we, over the years, leaned into licensing with, key characters from other best-in-class intellectual property and entertainment companies. And that, that's a very special experience as well. And those best-in-class partners, whether it's Warner or Disney or Sanrio or Pokemon, they see this unique value that we bring to their brand as well. And we're really good partners over time. Like we have a Sanrio exclusive store in LA. I mean, we do some really fun stuff with all of these guys because there's such an intersection with our consumers. But then we started getting into things where we stretched the brand as we became multi-generational around our 20th year into different kinds of licensing, not just the big kids animated films, but things that were a little unexpected. And that's what caused us to build out our whole Bear Cave online age-gated area. We're now 40% of our sales are now to teens and adults. People don't expect that usually when I share that information, but with the whole rise of kidulting, we were right on the precipice of that trend. And people recall us with such fondness that it's so much fun to get a Deadpool bear or their Darth Vader bear. Like just think about that. And then, we also have something we call trend animals, where we do something a little bit edgy, like an axolotl or a frog or crazy stuff. Like we have Mothman. I don't even think that's not real, but but we have one. So.
Yeah. I love the term kidulting. Who came up with that one?
Oh, gee, I don't know, but they should have trademarked it.
I used to be the CEO of Yum Brands, and went online, and I was happy to see that you have KFC branded outfits that people wear.
You bet. You can put a bucket on your bear.
Yeah, I love that. And what would be the most creative, unique Build-A-Bear that you've ever created?
Well, I don't do much of that. I make a lot of suggestions, but the team is very involved. But I get a lot of suggestions from my own now 20-something girls. And I will say that both of them were just adamant that we make a strawberry Highland cow. And my team did make a strawberry Highland cow. Now, listen, it could have come from anywhere, and they were, just right on the trend as well. And that's been a very good seller for us. We love our strawberry Highland cow, and I like to give the credit to my daughters.
That's great, like any good mom should. And I want to really get into how you lead, but I want to take you back for just a second here, and I'd love for you to tell me a story from your upbringing that really still influences the way how you lead today.
Oh, geez. Just like with you, any of us that have taken this most of the time circuitous route that has been, laced with some luck and a little bit of talent, you're going to have those stories. And I actually wrote a whole book about it, called Stories in Heart. And there's a lot of, my dad was full of wisdom. My mom taught me a lot of great lessons. But I use, actually, there's a few that I use on a fairly regular basis, but one of them is a story about climbing a tree. And it's actually the first chapter of the book, and it's called Life's a Beach. And by a beach, I mean it's a beach tree. In that I stumbled upon this really big tree the year my grandmother died when I was about 11. And it was way too big for me to climb, but I focused on it, tried to find a way to get it done. And finally, after many weeks of the summertime and many tries, I got up to this big limb. And I was so proud of myself. And there was like, people had scratched their names up there. And I was like, ooh, yeah, small town. I'm like, I'm the only girl, just going on the initials, and probably the youngest kid to do this. I'm super proud. And I'm up there and I realize I don't know how to get down. And so the first lesson in that is, wow, if you plan hard enough and think hard enough and keep trying, you can do the impossible. And for a kid, climbing a tree like that was impossible. But you also have to know your exit strategy. So I didn't have an exit strategy, and I needed to get home. And I thought, well, if you're smart enough to get up here, you're smart enough to get down. And so I figured out a way to wiggle out to the very end of the limb where it got really, bouncy, swung down and bounced hard and fell into, some pine needles and stuff, and rolled down a hill and, no worse for wear. And then all of that is all life lessons in there, right? If you just stay focused, ingenuity, but the biggest life lesson out of that, it wasn't the first two things of try hard, planning, tenacity gets you to the goal. Oops, better know how to get out of it. But if you just stay focused, you'll still figure out a way to do it. It was the way I translated this experience. There are a lot of people in life that would translate that experience as, ooh, I should try something risky, but I might fail. I might get in trouble. It might be scary. I translated that as, oh, if I try something risky, it might turn out to be a blast. And the bouncing out of that tree, the swinging on that limb was the most fun thing. I went back many times that summer and climbed the tree just to bounce up and down on that limb, to fall into the pine needles and roll down the hill. So sometimes the things that you think are the bad part or the unexpected part. And so just that translation of life and challenges and what I could have labeled or stamped as a failure of don't try crazy things because you might get hurt. I was like, try crazy things because that's how you have a good time. And just think how that impacts every decision that you make, where you're like, well, I've never done that before and it looks totally impossible. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. You and I have a little bit in common with our backgrounds. I have a copper beech tree, which I happen to love at my house. It's my favorite tree of my life. And I also
they're the best. They're so big.
It's huge.
Loving,
it's huge. And I also grew up in small towns. And you grew up in a small town in southern Tennessee, and we both were in advertising. And you made your way to New York, and you got into the advertising business. I felt like a duck out of water when I was in New York. So I didn't go to New York. I went to another city. I went to Dallas and built my advertising and marketing career there. But you went to New York and you succeeded extremely well. How'd you go into that new environment and succeed?
Well, thank you for that layup, because it's just another beech tree. Right. I looked at that and said, well, that's ridiculous and impossible. Let's go. So I, no kidding, set a goal that I wanted to go to New York and get a job in a top 10 agency in 1 week. Cold call. I cold called people out of a red book. I went down through the names and said, that person looks nice. That person looks nice. And I would just call until somebody picked up. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in New York such and such week. Can I just come by and have a cup of coffee? I really want to break into the industry. How hard can this be? And I got 15 interviews set up in 1 week. 15. And, 3 a day. I'm like, no problem. 5. How big is that? I mean, it's a tiny little island. How hard can that be? Right? Anyway, long story short, I got a job at DDB Needham in the training program on that Friday. And this is that thing still. It's so good to never really know your odds. Or at least don't believe them. Somebody's going to get that job, right? Somebody's going to get that job. Why not you? So I kind of pushed the envelope on that. Even that last day, she's like, well, we'll get back in touch with you. I'm like, what else do you need to know? Let's just do this now. And she did it. She genuinely gave me that offer right then.
Wow, you asked for the order. That's great. And you mentioned earlier you worked at Mattel and you had the Barbie business and you spent several years at Hasbro and you've worked on many iconic brands. What advice can you give leaders on how to really build a brand that lasts?
Well, I think that building a brand that lasts is not that much different from building a company that lasts. It's understanding the underlying promise, and it needs to be something bigger than the utility of the brand or the idea. And people believe in and work for and make sacrifices for ideas, not things. So when we could be a teddy bear, there's lots of teddy bear companies. But for us to kind of hold and evoke this emotion, that's because we stand for something. And it's to add a little more heart to life. It's a mission statement for us. And that's not just to our guests inside the store, it's the way we run this company. So I think that elevation of the construct of brand equity, which is hard for people to understand when you're talking about it in business terms, but in human terms, it's how does the brand make you feel? How does that company make you feel? Like, the shirt you have on right now, there's that shirt, I could probably get something just like it in numerous colors for a wide variety of prices from $15 to $250, depending on what might be printed on the front of it. Why? The utility of the shirt is still the same, but it's because of the way it makes you feel. What is it saying about you? I use Coca-Cola, one of the best branders in the world. We have our chief brand officer is actually a Coca-Cola veteran. And, so you like, what's the difference between that liquid inside of that aluminum can versus every other liquid inside of another aluminum can, to the point that you will choose to hang a miniature version of it on a Christmas tree? Like, it's the way it makes you feel. That equity is, when you get back down to business now, is extremely monetizable. And you have to understand what your brand truly means. Keep elevating, keep elevating, keep elevating. Do we mean a teddy bear? Do we mean a retail store? Or do we mean something else? Why don't you throw our bears away? It's because we mean something else. Even after, why do you take your bear to college? It's because we mean something else. People are placing value on this item in a way that makes it not an item anymore. And that's actually the pivot of the whole company. So when I was at Hasbro, what we needed to do, and we did under Brian Goldner's leadership, was to understand that the big idea is that not that Hasbro is a toy company that can be the most efficient importer of plastic and stuff. We needed to understand that we were an intellectual property company that just happened to make toys. And that was when everything started to happen that took Hasbro to an entirely different realm, inclusive of when I ran the boys business, ran the whole US toy division, but when we launched the first Transformers film. And just that alone was an extraordinary experience. And the irony of it is that it truly transformed the company. We were a car and became a robot, like right before our own eyes. Just a fantastic journey of brand expertise, corporate evolution, leadership through change, how to monetize and spread and kind of like to brands into different categories and consumers. Just fabulous experience. And I saw that same potential here in Build-A-Bear. I mean, we really needed to not be like, we were like a mall-based retail company for kids that accidentally built the brand one heart ceremony at a time. They needed to become an intellectual property company that just happened to have vertical retail.
Hey everyone, it's Kula from How Leaders Lead. And if you've watched our podcast for any number of episodes, you probably know that a common theme from all of the great leaders we interview is that they are active learners. They have this commitment to continuing to learn and grow so that they don't stay stagnant and so that they continue to see success in their leadership and in their life. This theme of active learning is so important, and it's what David's latest book, How Leaders Learn, is all about. It's all about helping you develop that skill of active learning so that you too can continue to see success in your leadership and in your life. The book is really entertaining. It pulls stories from some of our greatest podcast guests and pairs those stories with insights that you can incorporate into your leadership and into your life right away. Grab How Leaders Learn on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And I think you're really going to love it. You feel David's personality through the pages and through his storytelling. And it's a really powerful way to level up your leadership.
You go to Build-A-Bear and the business is really struggling. Talk about the business situation when you first came in.
So I said we started in 1997 and then we went public, and then there was had the recession. I guess that started in 2008, somewhere around there. So this was 8, 9, 10 really rough years in there. But then Build-A-Bear had really not stabilized all the way to 2013 and continued to contract. And some of it is just bad luck. I would say the timing of the recession was when Build-A-Bear was kind of like on its upswing, and when companies are really expanding rapidly, you're really not that focused on the best deal you can get, the most efficient process. That's usually the second phase of growth, right? You kind of get this revenue momentum, and then your next phase of growth from the investor community is just make yourself more profitable for every dollar that comes through. You focus on the bottom line for a minute there, and then you got to reinvent yourself somehow. But they didn't get that luxury before the recession came, and then they didn't really know how to reinvent. Some of it was just the continuing just focus on returning to what was in an environment that didn't exist anymore. The traffic had changed, mall shopping patterns had changed. It was the rise of e-com, and we just weren't not participating in the digital economy in any way, and really didn't see another way than just to grow with malls. And look, that had been a really valuable model for a lot of different companies for a very long time, but we had to think differently. And so, we were just, the store base was unprofitable. From my time at Stride Ride, I really knew how to clean up a lot of profit. I mean, I'm not bad at making money. I know how to make money. So I brought in my CFO from my previous company, and we had a playbook that we had already created from the Stride Ride days. We returned that to profitability in 3 years and had a 12 comp. And, so there were a lot of levers we knew how to pull. But that whole insight that I just shared with you about pivoting the company to an intellectual property company that happens to have vertical retail, that doesn't. And then you're going to build out new rev streams, right? You can't do that until your vertical retail is making money. So that was our first order of business. And we returned to profitability in the first year after losing $49 million the previous year.
Wow. And your company's been on a heck of a run, no question about that. But I also understand you have a pretty interesting formula for a turnaround. It's called SDSS. Tell us about it.
Yeah, look, the two things, I promise it's this easy in business and life, is there's 2 buckets of stuff, right? It's stupid stuff and smart stuff. That's all there is. There's 2 buckets of stuff. And if you want to do a turnaround quickly, get the stuff in the buckets, the stupid stuff and the smart stuff. The first thing that you do is stop doing stupid stuff. And everybody knows what the stupid stuff is. I know you've seen this.
Absolutely.
You've seen, and some of it is a little gray, but most of it's just not. Okay, let's run the cost all the way through that. How much is it really costing you to do that? Oh, you're losing money on this endeavor. Why are you doing that? Just stop doing that. Let's start there. Everything that is losing money, not on brand, not consumer centric, not data driven, not money making, not hurdling, stop it. Do you know how hard it is to get people to stop doing stupid stuff?
Well, pretty hard if they've been doing it a long time.
Right. It's really hard, even though they know it's stupid. So it's not a comment on the people. Most of the people that are doing this stuff were told to do it by somebody like you, somebody like me, right? It's processized, like it's part of the process. Like it's, that report comes off, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. 17 reports get printed out every day, you're going to read them. You don't even know what you're doing with them. Maybe nothing. But here's the reason why you have to start with the stopping part. It's about a discipline of asking why. You're learning a discipline about everything that you do needs to be of value. And I'm not telling you to work harder and longer and more and do that. I'm starting with I want you to do less, right? Let's do that. If you don't start there, if you start with the start doing smart stuff, then they will do both. And then you're going to end up blowing your SG&A because you have to hire a whole bunch of people to do smart stuff while all these other people are doing the stupid stuff that's keeping you from being profitable. I mean, it's not really that hard. I know you're tracking with me. But
I got you. I love it.
I want you to think about it in your life too. People need to do this in life. Just, what you do. And like people, I wish I could do this. If I could do this, I could just get this much in my bank account, or I want to lose 5 pounds. You know what the stuff is that's keeping you from losing 5 pounds. I know you do. Stop doing it.
Then you start doing then you can start doing the smart stuff.
That's
and really
right.
start making some big time money,
Free up some time.
There you go. I love it. We'll return with the rest of my conversation with Sharon Price John in just a moment. But first, I want to take you back to my conversation with Brian Niccol. I interviewed him when he was CEO of Chipotle before he made the move to Starbucks last year. Just like Sharon, this is someone who knows what it takes to power a successful turnaround.
When I first got here, I'd say the organization was a little bit on their back foot. They had a couple missteps, had a lot of ideas floating around in the organization on what could be better for the organization, but we weren't, I'd say, following through on those ideas. And we didn't pick a lane on one or two of the ideas to go really big and go after it. And so that was one of the things I wanted to do, is make sure that we picked a critical few items. Once we picked the critical few items, it was like, do we have the structure to go make this happen? So, this is classic things you used to talk to me about all the time: strategy, structure, now execution, right? When you looked around the structure, I was like, man, we don't have some of the experts that we need in these areas to fulfill our ambition or our strategy. And so we had to make some changes. We needed to get a great supply chain leader. We needed to get a great marketing leader. We needed to get some additional digital capability. We had a terrific digital leader, but he needed additional capability with him because we're going to grow this so much. So it was taking the time now to invest in having the right people in the right positions so that we could execute the strategy. And then look, we held ourselves accountable. It's like, now we're going to go execute against these things. And, I'm happy to say, you pointed out when I started, I think our market cap was right around like 6 or 7 billion. And today we're over 50 billion. For the most part, my team is intact. We've only really had one person transition. I think that's a testament to the strategy. It's a testament to the people believing in the strategy. And then I think hopefully it's a testament to the culture that I've created around this organization and the values that we have.
Go back and listen to my entire conversation with Brian, episode 168, here on How Leaders Lead. So you come in and you've been in situations where you had to turn things around. You just mentioned the previous company you were at and all that you learned there. What's your take on how much a company should focus on in terms of what's made them successful versus what's coming next? And you have this interesting analogy, which I loved, about looking in the rearview mirror. Would you share that?
Yeah, that was that I had mentioned that during my first few weeks and months at Build-A-Bear, when I was trying to assess what was going on. And it was actually an employee of mine that had been at Build-A-Bear for a long, long time. And she eventually became the chief strategy officer. She came busted into my office one day, and we do a lot of whiteboarding. I think in sort of 3D. So she starts drawing something, and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I've got it. I know what's going on. Look at this. And she's showing this data. And she's like I'd mentioned, she goes, they're just trying. Everything that they're doing is out of that first playbook that we had created. They're just trying to replicate with significant specificity of everything that we did when we were successful in 1998, 1999, to that, and they've got to stop. Then they don't believe that you're going to be able to do that. They also, which she didn't say, and I give her credit for this, they were also super afraid that as a turnaround agent, a change agent, that I was literally going to rip the heart out of Build-A-Bear. Nobody wanted to change the company, at least the emotional part, the culture. Maxine had created a really wonderful culture. But I think you can be successful and still have a great culture. Just winning wasn't a part of the culture anymore. So I needed to give an analogy that they could understand that I wasn't going to rip the heart out of the company, and I wasn't trying to destroy the past. But it doesn't mean that we're going to be successful if we don't move forward. And it was this rearview mirror analogy. I painted a picture of what we could become based on all this equity that they've created, and we could be so much more than that based on what you've done. But you're going to have to change your mindset, and we're going to have a different kind of strategy. And I put up a big windshield of a car that had a rear view mirror on it, this huge screen in our presentation theater at the time. And I said, a lot of engineering and math and thought goes into how big a rear view mirror is compared to a windshield. And I'm like, do you know why? And they don't know why. And I'm like, well, it's because of the ratio of time that you need to be looking forward versus looking back while you're driving. What would happen if all you did is look in the rearview mirror while you're trying to drive? And like, well, it'd crash. And I'm like, that's what we're going to do, guys. It doesn't mean that what we're going to stick in that rearview mirror doesn't matter. It matters where you've been. It's important. You can, sometimes you're backing up or you're referring to it or it's important information. We're going to put all that in there. That's fine. I'm not trying to kill it. But we have to look out in front of us. And I don't mean right in front of us. I mean way out in front of us. And we're going to put together a strategy. Think of that as a GPS. And I kind of took them through this whole analogy. And then I asked them who was in the car with us. And they start naming off things. And I'm like, this is good. What else? And they're like, our guests, our factories, our investors, our board, exactly the people working at our mall partners. They're all in the car with us. Anybody that has a stake in our success is in this car with us. And I'm like, so who's driving? And I thought they were going to, I think they thought I wanted them to say me, but I didn't. I'm like, you're driving. We together are the drivers of this car. And, but here's the thing. And this was the big, all of that was fun. They kind of went with me on this part. And then it got silent when I said, and what I don't need is backseat drivers. And if you don't want to get in the car, that's okay with me. But you need to leave because we don't have time for this. And it's not like I don't want new ideas. I do. But come to me with the new ideas. Don't take this strategy and then on the backside of it all, decide you're not going to do it or talk it down or this is never going to work. That can be the failure of companies. And I don't have time for that. And the place went silent. So
yeah, I'm sure it did. Well, that's the difference between being tough and tough-minded. You were tough-minded in terms of what you needed to have, not tough, and I think that's a great trait of great leaders. And so you turn the business around and now your stock's gone crazy. You've had 3 years in a row of record-breaking revenue. What advice? Okay, excuse me, 4. All right. 4 years of record-breaking revenue. Well, what have you learned or what advice can you share with people on how to overlap the big year? Because a lot of times when you have that big year, people go, oh, geez, I don't know how we're going to do it again. And what's your approach to overlapping the big results?
It took a long time actually for the investor community to sort of figure out what we were doing, as an aside. But these consistent results are clearly very helpful. But I think that
well, they're not helpful. They're totally instrumental. If you don't have them, if you don't have consistent results, your stock doesn't go up. Let's face it.
That's very true. Maybe there. If you sell a big dream, sometimes they'll invest in that. But I think that not only did we show those consistent results, I think that there's now more believability. It's more believable to them of the stretchability of this brand and the business model. And so it's not only just, are you seeing an expansion of the stock price, you're seeing an expansion of the multiple. And that's because we're not being directly valued as a mall-based retailer. And when you get kind of stuck in that bucket, it's hard to break through. So now that we're expanding globally and all these other, and being more overt we're a brand first that happens to have retail, that's changing the conversation, and that's a good thing. But we had the one big year coming out of COVID. So 2021 to 2020 was not, while amazing, that's, off a super soft year. And we had to maneuver through COVID, our entire retail shut down. So that's a crazy story. But we had so many strategies in place by 2019 on what we were doing. And we worked very hard on our infrastructure during that downtime, because it's one of those things where you're like, oh, what am I going to do if I don't have to spend all my time, effort running retail stores, for a change? We focused on e-com. And so, and implemented numerous things that were just sitting on the shelf that we hadn't done, that helped us unlock that value and connect a lot of omni-channel opportunities that we knew would add value, but we just hadn't gotten to them. So 2021 was sort of just the first year of that. Now we're kind of expanding retail footprint on a global basis. So now we're kind of over that hump. 2022 would have been the first anniversary of a big hump year. Now it's more the conversation that I have to talk to the team. Look, we're at a kind of in this sort of trajectory of every year's going to be a record year if you make one more dollar. That's not good enough. So now it's we're not going to the goal is not one more dollar, guys. And, so I'm going to be up saying another record year, another record quarter, or whatever it is. That doesn't mean we should all be yelling and cheering, because $1 is not the goal. So it's a whole different kind of discussion now, of not the battle of just to be profitable. It's the battle of pushing the trajectory to a higher, curve, and getting people to understand that.
What's the minimum percentage you got to grow your revenues or your bottom line every year?
Well, I can't tell you that. So.
Well, don't tell Wall Street what you're going to do every year?
We've told them this year we've given them guidance for the year, but it's a kind of an odd year because we're trying to predict all this tariff stuff. And, that is just an odd kind of circumstance.
But you now $1 over the previous year isn't enough. So you're raising your targets for your people all the time, right? So what have you picked up on how to do that so that they can embrace it? Do you have a process for getting buy-in on that?
Yeah, like most companies, we do both bottom up and top down planning. And usually I give the company a ton of credit. We are not devoid of creative ideas. We have so many ideas and so many things that we could do. It's the hard part is picking them and putting the right resources against them, right? And that's it's more of the pipelining process than anything, and teaching the organization how to, this is still a $500 million company. And I came from multi-billion-dollar organizations where that process of at the mid-tier, director level, VP level, that you knew how to put your business plan together, right? And you knew how to come in with the potential ROI and what the investment needed to be. That's still a muscle for us,
Right.
because for so many years, the money was made in the retail operations. And practically all of the money was made in the retail operations. So building out new conceptual opportunities is still a muscle for us. Now you have people at the highest levels that have done that all their lives. And it's really, really, and I'm sure you've experienced this before, both invigorating and satisfying to see that evolution happen in your own company with your own folks.
Yeah, and it's definitely happening. You do have a lot of great ideas. I mean, your Valentine's days are always amazing. That's your second most popular holiday, and then sometimes you have such good ideas they're almost impossible to execute. Now it was interesting. I learned about the birthdays are another that huge driver for you. And you tell us about the launch of your Count Your Candles campaign and what it taught you as a leader. Because this is a great idea, obviously.
That really, like so many of these concepts, whether it's Honey Girls, which we launched and had a film with Sony Pictures, or it's Merry Mission, which we also did our own animated film, it's born out of white space, right? So like Honey Girls was like, oh, we're losing the little girl. There was a K-goy before a kidult. K-goy means kids getting older, younger. So they age out of traditional toys faster now. They digitize faster, right? So you want to try to create concepts that just hold on to that little girl or the little boy like one more year, which means like just get them to 8 or 9 years old. Like, we would still be totally playing with, the traditional and physical toys at that age. But they do get sucked out earlier now into the digital world. But so we came up with a whole concept on Honey Girls, was like all about the things that little girl loves, right? Whether it's music and being a superstar and a contest and, friendship and better together and girl power. And so that came out of white space. The whole thing about Merry Mission was the holidays, was how to insert ourselves into the tradition of the holiday, not just be the gift under the tree, because we were seeing that our traffic curve was flatter than the traffic curve of the mall. So we weren't getting our fair share, right? So how is it that people are coming to the mall with their kids in tow to go see Santa and they don't go to Build-A-Bear? The reason was because people were saying, "Oh, no, we're not going to Build-A-Bear today. That you wait and see what you get under the Christmas tree." So we had to create a story that you had to go to Build-A-Bear. Build-A-Bear is part of the holidays, not the end of the holiday, the part of the holiday. So this was the same thing. What do we do? Because we know the number one reason why people come to Build-A-Bear for the first time is because of their birthdays. How do I get 1 year younger, and increase the number of people who want to come to Build-A-Bear for their birthday party or their birthday parties too, but for the birthday in this case. And we did lots of calculations and figured out and said, you know what, we could have a bear where people can come in. We'll create a specific bear, so I manage the cost, where people can pay their age. And on average, if our math is right, we know exactly how much they're going to pay. And and even though it's a sharper margin, that's really an acquisition cost, right? Of pulling down, and we expected to pull the age down by 1 year. And I would also to be a participant in the Pay Your Age Day program, you have to join our loyalty program. So there's an acquisition cost involved, and I get 1 more year of lifetime value, right? That's easy. That makes all the sense in the world. And so, by the way, all of that has worked. But for the launch of this idea, we're like, let's just make one big day where everybody can pay their age on anything. So everybody knows about this. Also sounds reasonable, right? I mean, we've done crazy things. I mean, like we call them crazy. Like we had multiple National Teddy Bear Days where there were lines around the block for $5 bears. Like, no, and we managed that. But on this particular day, for whatever set of reasons, with little to no marketing, just some social media, by the time I mean, I was woken up at 5 a.m. by my chief operations officer because the malls were shutting down in the UK and that I had to get up and come into the office immediately. And when I got there, there was a whole task force in the war room. I'm like, what's happening here? And they're like, the US stores are going to open in X hours. And there are already lines about outside the mall on the East Coast. I'm like, it was incomprehensible. And I mean, we were the news story of the day. That's
the power of the brand, though.
In many ways, I don't want anybody to have a bad experience at Build-A-Bear. And I know that there were people that did have some less than advantageous experiences that day. But we did offer a voucher for those who could not get through the line, just not enough hours in the day. But at the end of the day, it did tell us something that I don't think even though I would have been the biggest advocate in the world for, hey, we've got this super strong brand with 90+% brand awareness and affinity numbers and blah, 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 blah. It was an emboldened moment for us as a leadership team to go, even we don't know what this brand means to people. Even we don't get it. And, as much as I hope we've made that up to folks at this point, and I think in a big sweeping way we likely have, it taught me a lesson of sometimes, we couldn't have planned it any better. I mean, I can't look back on that. And look, that's the way, and that's the way to drive yourself mad is, would you have made the same decision at the same moment with the same data? And I would have.
Yeah.
But the lesson was, you may think you understand the depth of meaning of this brand or something else that you might be working on, and you might not. And that really said something to me about and I'm a big idea person. I'm a big optimist. And I had a vision of what this could be that changed my mind that my vision was too small.
Well, sometimes you don't know what you don't know what you don't know, and you found out in a hurry that your brand is even bigger than what you even anticipated it might be.
I mean, like, who would have ever guessed that Kentucky Fried Chicken would be the biggest fast food chain in China?
Yeah, well, that was a very good thing to happen to me as well. And we had a lot of lines, let me tell you that. This has been so much fun, and I want to have some more with my lightning round of questions. So are you ready for this?
I don't know.
All right, we'll see. The 3 words that best describe you:
creative, funny, or fun, and high integrity.
If you could be one person for a day besides yourself, who would it be?
Maybe like a rock star, like just to do it.
Your biggest pet peeve?
A lack of integrity.
Who would play you in a movie?
Reese Witherspoon.
What's the one thing you do just for you?
I go on long walks and listen to inspirational podcasts.
Besides your family, what's your most prized possession?
My memories.
If I turned on the radio in your car, what would I hear?
It could go from 70s rock to current rap.
What's something about you few people would know?
I'm an artist.
What's one of your daily rituals, something that you never miss?
Probably morning meditation.
All right, you're out of that lightning round. Good job there, Sharon. You're a wife and a mom of 3. What's something you've learned at work about leadership that you apply at home?
Oh, it's the other way around.
Well, that's a great learning.
I learned more about being a leader, being a mom, than I've learned about being a mom by being a leader.
What would be the top thing you've learned by being a mom as it relates to leadership?
You got to let some of it, if it doesn't matter, you got to let it go. Let people make their own, if it's not endangering the company, let people make mistakes. They'll create so much more value later if you give them that grace.
And last question here. What's one piece of advice you'd give to anyone who wants to be a better leader?
It's not about you. And the minute you can find kind of that balance between understanding that along with this role, there's going to come a little bit of ego because you're constantly making decisions with imperfect information that impacts millions of dollars and hundreds of people. The flip side of that is you have to not have so much ego that you don't understand why you're really doing what you're doing, and that people matter. And you need to listen to people and surround yourself with people that are smarter than you in every single functional area. And why are you spending the time, effort, and energy on that if you're not willing to listen to them?
It's so hard to become a CEO, and there are fewer female CEOs, and I think we'd all like to see in the world. Do you have any particular advice you'd give to aspiring female leaders on how they can, move up the ladder and achieve the kind of success that you've been able to achieve?
I think that there is a statistically significant data that would imply that women can be more reticent about making those decisions in that imperfect world than men are often. And yet they are equally as capable of making the most right choice in the moment. And understand that contemplativeness is actually a power, not a downside. And everyone goes through that moment of trepidation, but the guy will pull the trigger and the woman sometimes will not. It's the same data with the same answer. But if you can't do that, it's gonna hold you back. And I think that sometimes it's a misunderstanding of the value of the penchant for action. And again, in learning to balance, you can't bring all of this with you if you can put yourself back in that moment and say, I would have made the same decision with the same data. Mm-hmm. Everybody's going to get in a situation where if I'd only known this, if I'd only known that. But here's the key. You didn't know this and you didn't know that. And in most of the cases, that was actually unknowable. So look at it as a learning tool and move on. Those can be flywheels to further success, not reasons to burden you. And I don't know, maybe I just don't think like that. Maybe it's because I was a gymnast, that just had to fall 1,000 times before you got it right. Or maybe it's because I climbed that tree and I defined failure in a different way at an early age. But if you have to boil it down in all the data that I've read, it's an underestimation of their own capabilities. And I don't know why that is.
Well, I think it's great that you represent a leader that shows people that it's possible. And, in a tough world, it's not easy to do what you've done, and you've done it. And I want to congratulate you on, all your success and the fact that you are a leader that people can look up to. And, for sure, I want my daughter to listen to this podcast. And, for sure, I think any leader should listen to this podcast because you're an out and out leader. You know how to inspire people. You know how to make things happen and you get things done. And I want to thank you for taking the time to share some of your thoughts with me today in this conversation. I've enjoyed it a lot.
David, thank you so much. And, I'm sure as you also just have to keep learning, keep growing. It's just been a pleasure to be here. And I always love having conversations with folks that have worn the same shoes. So it's always so valuable. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. There aren't a lot of mall-based brands that have managed not just to survive, but to grow, and I mean really grow, in today's retail landscape. That makes Build-A-Bear a rare kind of success. But for me, what's really impressive is how Sharon pulled it off. She realized people weren't just buying a bear, they were buying a feeling. It meant something. And that insight into the brand didn't just shape the marketing, it sparked new channels, new audiences, new ideas, not to mention serious growth. Because when you know what your brand really means, it doesn't limit your options, it sharpens them. You can stretch your brand to places you never imagined, and you can drive growth without losing what makes it special. So here's your challenge this week. Define the emotional core of your brand. What does it mean to people? What does it make them feel? Now do that for your business, and if you're not running a brand, do it for yourself because this exercise will help you think of yourself as a brand as well. Because a clear sense of meaning just isn't a fluffy, feel-good exercise. It's a strategic advantage and a powerful engine for growth. So do you want to know how leaders lead? What we learned today is that great leaders understand that meaning is your brand superpower. Coming up next on How Leaders Lead is Mike Cesario, founder and CEO of a cult favorite beverage company called Liquid Death. So be sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss it. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of How Leaders Lead, where every Thursday you get to listen in while I interview some of the very best leaders in the world. I make it a point to give you something simple on each episode that you can apply to your business so that you will become the best leader that you can be.